So on one hand, the sign is saying clearly this is Mount of Olives, Chapel of the Ascension. On the other hand, this looks to me very much like a minaret of a mosque. So what's going on here? So shalom everyone, welcome to another vlog by Danny the Digger, and this time completing the series of following Jesus in Jerusalem. We are back in Jerusalem itself, actually on the top of the mountain that crowns the city from the east, Mount of Olives. Look at this amazing view of the old city. The old city is actually around the corner, but this is all the northern part of the modern city of Jerusalem. Maybe Samuel can be seen there in the distance. Abu Ghosh, the sites relating to Emmaus, they're all there. And the book of Acts tells us that after the resurrection, after appearing at Emmaus, Jesus returned to the heavens, according to the book of Acts, the Mount of Olives. And this site is claiming since the early 4th century to be that very place. Welcome to the Chapel of the Ascension. And having a little quiet moment with the sun shining, let's take abuse of this opportunity and quickly go in to show what is this site all about. And it's all about this piece of rock here in the middle. This piece of rock is said to be the footprint of Jesus. When he went up to the heavens, he left his footprint over here as he ascended, returning to his Father. The chapel itself, believe it or not, is actually part of a mosque. What's going on here? This is a mihrab. This is a niche pointed towards Mecca, not an apse pointed towards the rising sun. So yes, welcome to Jerusalem. Things can get pretty complicated, and the Chapel of the Ascension is definitely a good demonstration of all of this. This site, actually the first record of the ascension of Jesus was by Eusebius, who tells us that the mark of the ascension was at the church of Eleone, the church that was built by Helena. But already 50 years later, Egeria, a Spanish nun who travels here, she tells us that it was actually in a separate location which she labels as Imbomon. And Imbomon means something like a higher or raised platform. And the assumption is that she was referring to this site, because the church of the Eleone is actually down in the slope there. Something there doesn't fit. You would expect the ascension to be from a high place, and plus the fact that the Eleone church, the focal point of it is inside a cave. Jesus couldn't have ascended up from a cave. That may have been the reason why at a very early stage it was kind of relocated to this location. Now, I'm sorry, if there's an indentation in the rock, I would not ascribe it to the footprint of Jesus. These are, for me, like medieval traditions that were created to create tangible evidence for the pilgrims. But I am fascinated by the fact of this site being sanctified, built up both by the Byzantines, again by the Crusaders, and today it's actually maintained by the Muslims. Actually, Christians need to pay, or any visitor has to pay the Muslim family that is maintaining this site 5 shekels a person. That used to be actually the standard in all sites, but only here it is still preserved, this special arrangement, shall we call it. If you argue that this is not the spot, because you don't follow, indentations in the rocks, then I like to quote one of my tour guide friends who says, well, if it's not here, it's near. This is Mount of Olives. If it didn't happen at this very spot, it did happen somewhere in this location, somewhere around the summit of the mountain. But I'm fascinated by the fact that Christian pilgrims of the Byzantine period have marked a certain spot, and one of them, Al-Kulfus was his name, even provided a graph a chart that was copied, maybe not, very, very accurately, but it was copied, and the copy we have today presents it as a round church. Now, some scholars have debated whether this was really a round church, because usually concentric churches are octagonal. We have a few examples, like the Katisma Church, which I will review, like the St. Peter's Church in Capernaum, which I will review. And so some scholars estimated that Al-Kulfus, or whoever copied him, got it wrong. Furthermore, excavations that were carried out here did uncover anchors, 1, 2, 3, and 2 more over there, anchors of an octagonal building, and indeed the smaller chapel today is also octagonal. So even the sign is saying that these are the remains of the Byzantine church. But I'm sorry, someone got it wrong in the sign here. The excavations that were carried out here demonstrated that originally there was a round church here. I wish they would have preserved what was discovered. And it was the Crusaders who gave it the octagonal shape, perhaps copying the shape of the Dome of the Rock, which they saw up on the Temple Mount, which they, of course, did not relate to Muhammad. They rebranded it as Templum Domini. Believe it or not, the Dome of the Rock had the giant golden cross over it, and it was really identified as the, believe it or not, as the temple which Jesus visited. They got it a bit wrong. But there was a golden cross on top of it, and perhaps it inspired them then to rebuild a shrine over here, which was about the size of the Dome of the Rock, or at least much bigger than the current one. This is the aftermath of the Crusader expulsion, when only a smaller chapel was formed, and later the Muslims also filled up the arches and added the mihrab, and as you saw before, it became a mosque. But the most evident testimony for the Crusader artwork here are these capitals. See them? Each one is actually different, and then my favorite is the one over here, which even shows legendary medieval creatures, these griffons. So this is quite a peculiar site, combining early assumptions and then various developments that took over time. And since the 19th century, there's a status quo that there's a certain Muslim family that maintains the place. Visitors have to pay, but for the feast of the Ascension, there is an altar. You see, each congregation has its own altar, which they can use for their own marking of the event of the Ascension. What a fascinating, small but fascinating, such complicated site. I never get over it, to see both a chapel, medieval architecture and griffons, and yet also a minaret of a mosque. These are very, very interesting combinations. Okay, they're giving me the cue, it's time to go. So long for now. Thank you all for those that are supporting me. Thank you all for those who are following me. And until my next chapter, Litot.